Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a really powerful source in front of us today. Omprakash Valmiki's autobiography, Joothan. The foreword describes it pretty vividly, doesn't it? Calls it a book with a profound effect, like a scalpel penetrating deep into the flesh of society.
Absolutely. And we also have that really helpful context from Arun Prabha Mukherjee in the foreword and introduction.
Right. And that title, Joothan, it's so central to everything, isn't it?
It really is. The intro explains it literally refers to leftover food, the scraps often given to people considered lower caste. It's a powerful symbol of, well, degradation, humiliation.
So our mission today, our deep dive, is really to take this incredibly raw, honest material, Valmiki's own story, plus the context we have, and pull out the key insights.
Yeah, help you, the listener, understand that lived experience of untouchability in India all through Valmiki's eyes, and trace his journey, which is quite remarkable.
And the introduction puts Joothan right into the context of Dalit literature, doesn't it? Describes it as this crucial post-independence movement.
Exactly. It's presented as, the voice of the oppressed, fundamentally about reclaiming identity, reclaiming agency.
And that term Dalit itself,
Right.
the intro points out it's not just a label.
No, it's a political identity, chosen deliberately to signify oppression, but also, crucially, a resolve for liberation. Moving away from older terms that might have been, well, pejorative or maybe patronizing.
And the stories Valmiki shares, they're intensely personal, often really difficult to read, I found.
They are, but essential for understanding the realities he describes.
Absolutely. And because we're touching on such sensitive topics, caste discrimination, and, potentially politically charged aspects as they appear in the source, we need to be crystal clear.
Right.
We're not endorsing any specific viewpoints within this material.
Yeah.
Our aim is simply to report impartially on the content provided.
Just convey the ideas and experiences Valmiki shares from his perspective as presented in these specific sources we're looking at.
Exactly. It's about diving into this narrative, understanding it from the inside, based only on what the sources tell us. Right. So let's start at the beginning. The physical space, the geography that defined so much of his early life, growing up in the Basti.
Yeah, the source paints a really stark picture of his childhood home in Barla. It was right next to a cattle shed, apparently, near a pond called Dabawali.
And this pond, it wasn't just a landmark, was it?
No, it functionally separated them. The Churas and Charmers, his community, from the main village where the Tagas and upper caste lived in their brick houses, a clear physical divide.
The description of the Basti itself is just visceral, muck, stench, pigs roaming around, naked kids, constant fights.
It sounds incredibly harsh, and Valmiki throws down this challenge, doesn't he? Basically saying, anyone who calls the caste system ideal. If the people had to live in this environment for a day, you immediately get the brutal reality of that segregation. It wasn't abstract, it was the ground they walked on.
And those early lessons in discrimination, they weren't just confined to the Basti, were they? School was another arena.
Absolutely. The source mentions his first attempt at schooling and his father's plea to the teacher, Master Harful Singh. It's just heartbreakingly humble.
What did he say?
Something like, Master Ji, I will be forever in your debt if you teach this child of mine a letter or two. It shows that desperate hope for education, but also the power imbalance they were up against.
And even inside the school, discrimination was just part of the routine, like the water pump incident.
Oh, yeah. Untouchable kids had to stand near the pump, wait for someone else from another caste to touch it first. If they touched it, it was considered defiled, needed purification.
Imagine that every single day, just for a drink of water.
Exactly. It wasn't just occasional cruelty, it was built into the mundane. And he mentions beatings, too, almost daily, especially when he was weak. And teachers using incredibly abusive language.
He makes a point about that language, doesn't he? Saying repeating it would smear the nobility of Hindi.
Yes, drawing a parallel to criticism he faced later for having a Brahmin character swear in a story. It shows how deeply that language affected him.
But then there's that really intense incident. The headmaster, Kalaram, forcing him to sweep the playground. For 3 days.
Yes, that's horrifying. He describes the headmaster shouting abuse, Abe Chugrike, motherfucker, dragging him by the neck, threatening him, sweeping while crying with everyone just watching, public humiliation, enforced caste labor.
But then his father shows up. And the description of his reaction is just powerful.
It really is. Snatches the broom, eyes blazing, screaming, who is that teacher, that progeny of Dronacharya who forces my son to sweep?
That Dronacharya reference, It's significant, isn't it?
Hugely significant. The introduction explains how Dalit literature often re-examines figures like Eklavya the archer, whose thumb Dronacharya demanded to keep the caste hierarchy in place.
Right.
And tragically, the villagers later downplay the father's protest by saying, oh, he only made him sweep, Dronacharya took Eklavya's thumb, twisting history to justify the present.
Wow. That really connects the personal story to that bigger cultural point from the introduction.
It does. And the source says his father came back tired and dejected after the confrontation, sat up all night. But it also notes this incident, his father's stand, actually started something. Some elders in the Basti began to protest against the Tagas.
A small crack in the silence, maybe?
Perhaps. It shows how deep the humiliation ran and how maybe seeing it happen to a child could finally spark some resistance.
Speaking of indignities, let's talk about the labor they were forced into, and that symbol, Joothan.
The source describes just grueling work, harvesting crops for the Tagas, blazing sun, hot ground, prickly roots, sticky leaves, exhausting manual labor.
For almost nothing in return, right? The wages are tiny.
Which brings us back to Joothan, eating the leftovers from Taga feasts. Valmiki actually describes eating boiled porous and gruel from these leftovers with great delight back then.
Because food was so scarce.
Exactly. Survival trumped everything. But looking back, his reflection is sharp. What sort of a life was that? After working hard day and night, the price of our sweat was just Joothan.
And he notes that at the time, there were no grudges, or shame, or repentance. That's chilling.
It speaks volumes about the level of deprivation, maybe the internalization of their status. But that had limits, especially when his mother was involved.
The incident with Sukhdev Singh Tyagi. She asked for food after a feast.
Yes, and his response was just brutal. Pointed to the basket of dirty leaf plates, the leftovers, and sneered, basically, "You've got a basket of scraps, what more do you want? Know your place, Churi."
That public insult.
It was clearly a breaking point. The introduction mentions Valmiki uses the analogy of the goddess Durga for his mother's anger then, that fierce protective power rising up.
That's an incredible image.
Yeah.
And the family faced constant financial hardship beyond this labor too, right?
Yeah, his brother Sukhbir's death wasn't just a tragedy, it made things much worse financially. Even with another brother, Jasbir, working, most of his pay went to loans, like for their sister Maya's wedding.
Which led to that moment. He wanted to go to 6th grade, but there was no money.
And his mother just wept loudly, the source says. Neighborhood women gathered, watching their despair. It sounds awful.
But then his sister-in-law, his Bobby.
She makes this incredible sacrifice, offers her silver anklet, a wedding ornament to be pawned, with the village priest and moneylender, no less.
Vaidya Satyanarayana Sharma.
Right. Just so Valmiki could pay the admission fee, her words were apparently, "Sell it and get Lalaji admitted," even though his father tried to talk her out of it.
And Valmiki says that sacrifice still continues to empower me. What a testament to family support.
Absolutely. So, fueled by that, he goes to the new school, Tyagi Inter College, starts in the back row, but excels, moves to the front, still face contempt from some teachers, though.
Did he make friends?
He did, even across caste lines. Shravan Kumar Sharma, a Brahmin, is mentioned as being uniquely free of bias, which is explicitly contrasted with others.
Including teachers like Yogendra Tyagi. Good teacher, but
discriminatory in class. Instead of hitting Valmiki, he'd apparently pull his shirt and ask loudly how much pork he'd eaten.
I know.
Yeah, the whole class would laugh, torment him. It was a performance of his low status. And Valmiki's thinking, about the hypocrisy Tagas secretly eating pork at night, but acting pure by day.
This constant barrage. It must have weighed on him.
For sure. And it wasn't just school. There was this wedding custom, salam.
What was that?
The bride or groom would go around collecting money from the superior castes their families worked for. Valmiki saw it as creating an inferiority complex. Humiliating.
Did he have to do it?
He argued against it, but was forced to go once. Describes being stared at as if brought from a zoo, women making faces, commenting the stomachs of these shirals are never filled. He felt something coming to a boil inside him.
That simmering anger again.
And it led to action. Later, he and his family refused the custom for his siblings' weddings, told people, if you want to give, come to our house. He even wrote a story about it called Salam.
Taking a stand. What about the traditional labor, like skinning animals? His father did that work.
Yes, and Valmiki recounts being pulled out of school to help his uncle skin a bullock.
How did he feel about that?
It was his eldest sister-in-law who protested. She said, don't make him do that work. We can bear hunger. Don't drag him in this dirt. He says her words, that plea, stayed with him. Another form of resistance, really.
The book also touches on religious practices in the Bastis, right?
Yeah.
Different from mainstream Hinduism.
Yes, worship of local deities, animal sacrifices, pigs, roosters, liquor offerings. Valmiki was skeptical even as a kid, saw the sorcerers as fakes.
His father worried about that.
Yeah, kept asking if he'd become a Christian. And Valmiki's internal thought is so telling. Neither am I a Hindu. If I really were a Hindu, would the Hindus hate me so much? Questioning where he belonged.
And there was that disturbing incident with his brother-in-law.
Whipping him, supposedly possessed by a spirit,
Yeah.
accusing Valmiki of having a spirit too. Valmiki protested, realized it was all a fraud, and he connects this, in the source, to his brothers dying without proper medical care. The reliance on gods and sorcerers versus the need for real help.
Shows his critical thinking developing early on, questioning these traditions.
Definitely, especially when faced with such suffering.
So despite all these hardships, education really does emerge as this crucial path forward for him. A way to gain awareness.
Yeah, though high school itself had challenges. Studying by lantern, no electricity, noisy neighborhood, and those daily cuts of prejudice.
Like the woman, Falza's mother, dropping rotis into his hand.
From way above, lest her hand touch mine. He found it so insulting he threw them away, which understandably made his father furious.
But that incident had ripples, didn't it?
It did. The source says it impacted the Basti, contributed to people starting to refuse wageless work. His father still clung to the hope education could improve caste status.
But Valmiki himself reached a different conclusion.
A painful one, quoted right there. Caste cannot be improved by education. It can be improved only by being born into the right caste.
That's incredibly bleak, derived right from experience. But there were some moments of kindness.
Yes, Chamanlal Tyagi, a landowner, encouraged his reading as a kid. Later, after Valmiki passed high school, invited him into his home, fed him lunch using their own dishes.
That must have felt huge.
He says it made him emotional, especially that Chamanlal's daughter took the dirty dishes. A small act, but in that context, profound.
And these experiences seemed to boost the value of education in the Basti.
Seems so. Valmiki started an evening school on their porch, teaching kids and adults basic literacy. Shows the community saw the potential after his success.
His father even bought him the Gita, still hoping it would help.
Yeah, though Valmiki found it confusing, his half-baked mind, getting tied up in a quandary, still questioning.
College brought more challenges, more discrimination.
Definitely. Openly contemptuous teachers like Umdada Tyagi, biased grading and practicals by Brajpal Singh. This pushed him to leave Barla.
To Dehradun, facing real poverty there.
Extreme poverty, no proper clothes, terrible living conditions, working awful jobs, garbage truck, wood depot just to survive and study.
But it's there, in Dehradun, that something pivotal happens.
Absolutely transformative. At a library run by the Joothan community, a friend, Hemlal, gives him a book. Dr. Ambedkar. A biography.
And he'd never even heard of Ambedkar before.
Total shock. Years of schooling, learning about national figures, but Ambedkar, completely absent. Reading about him was like discovering a new chapter about life.
A framework for his own experiences.
Exactly. Understanding the struggle for the oppressed. It set him on a new path, exploring Ambedkar's ideology. His uncle disapproved, but his father...
What did his father say?
When Valmiki went to Roorkee for an election campaign related to Ambedkar's ideas, his father said, "You do whatever you think is right, just don't bring shame on me." That support from his illiterate Boer father, as he calls him, was crucial.
So education and Ambedkar provided this intellectual awakening, but caste reality didn't just vanish, did it?
Not at all. It followed him. Like the laundry man in the city refusing to iron his uniform.
So flat out refused.
Yep.
We don't wash the clothes of the Chura Chamars, we will lose our roti. Valmiki's feeling impossible to get past caste. Didn't matter, he'd left the village.
And that complex relationship with the Kulkarnis, the Brahmin family he lived with.
Yeah, Mrs. Kulkarni's maternal warmth, the Diwali bath tradition.
Yeah.
But underneath, his constant fear of being found out.
Until the incident with Professor Campbell.
Right. Professor Campbell was Dalit. And Savita, the daughter, served him tea in a separate cup. An ingrained practice. Valmiki saw it and decided he had to say something.
How did Savita react when he confronted her?
Initial shock, then justification based on stereotypes. SCs were uncultured, dirty, the usual prejudices.
And then he told her.
Yes, revealed his own identity. She couldn't believe it. "You are a Brahmin," her father had told her. He insisted, "I am an SC." Her shock, it created this yawning gap between them. shows how deep it runs, even in educated circles, not just a village thing.
His personal life, marriage to Chanda, also involved these struggles. Definitely. Refusing the traditional pig worship before the wedding angered his father, though he eventually accepted it. But Valmiki lost his friend Hemlal over at the same friend who gave him the Ambedkar book. Painful choices.
And his friendship with Qureshi, the Muslim police sub-inspector, shows another layer.
It really does. They're at Qureshi's home, the commandant is there, an upper caste guy from Valmiki's area. First question he asks Valmiki, which caste are you from?
Immediately.
Hears Valmiki's chura, gets visibly uncomfortable, stops talking to him, then tries to lecture Qureshi later about socializing with low caste people.
How did Qureshi react?
Rejected it completely. Stood by Valmiki. Their friendship deepened. Shows allyship crossing caste and religious lines.
But some of the most painful experiences seem to come from within his own family.
They really do. His niece Seema denying him at college because acknowledging him meant revealing her own caste. Her words are just raw.
What did you say?
You may be able to face it, I can't. What is the point of going around with the drum of caste tied around your neck? Heartbreaking honesty about the burden.
And even his wife Chanda and educated friends were bothered by his surname.
Yeah, it underscores how pervasive it is, the pressure even from loved ones to hide or conform.
Yet, through all this, he finds his voice. Writing and activism become his path.
The sources mention theater groups while he was working, training Jabalpur, Ambernath, staging plays, honing his skills, art as a way to process and critique.
He started writing poetry, plays, leading eventually to Joothan itself.
Right. He describes writing it as feeling like stripping myself naked. Received an ultimatum to submit it. A friend worried he'd lose prestige.
But his response?
Defiant. Why should one feel awkward in telling the truth, and that only those who've suffered this anguish know its sting? He acknowledges even then, much was left unsaid.
Moving to Maharashtra seems to have deepened his involvement.
Immensely. Immersed him in social work among Dalits, building on the work of Ambedkar and Jyotirao Phule. Got involved in Dalit literature, contributing to Himjarna, meeting other writers like Loknath Yashwant.
He mentions the name change movement there, too.
As a key struggle for Dalit selfhood, notes the violence, the protests, the relentless work of activists like Bapurao Jagtap despite huge setbacks.
And staging Dalit plays continued to be important.
Yes, like Daya Pawar's Mumbai Nagari, a form of resistance. But he also notes internal divisions, betrayals within the community over religious traditions, criticisms of Ambedkar. It wasn't simple.
His work in rural Chandrapur sounds intense. Extreme poverty, superstition.
Even a child sacrifice, tragically. It drove him to open schools in Dalit Bastis, working with people like Umesh Mishram, trying to offer that tool of education he valued, even knowing its limits against caste.
And that incident with the textbook, the lesson on Ambedkar being ripped out.
Powerful symbol. A Brahmin teacher ordered students to do it. When the torn pages hit the newspaper Lokmat, it sparked massive protests. Valmiki spoke at rallies, felt that intense connection to the movement.
His reading continued to shape him, too.
World literature, Hindi classics, Marxism, Buddhism via Rahul Sankirtayan's translations, all challenging his beliefs, offering new ways to understand the world.
But finding his voice as a writer still wasn't easy. That experience with Sarika magazine.
Years of delays, eventual rejection, shows the barriers weren't just social, they were in the literary world too.
Which brings us back to his surname, Valmiki. So central.
It really is. His caste name, too, caused dire situations, affected relationships, made him constantly question keeping it.
Different reactions to it, though.
Totally. Some friends found it distinctive, brave, self-assertion.
But the counter.
Brutal. What? So brave. After all, he is a Chura. His surname spares us the hassle of asking, shows the stigma others carried.
And being mistaken for Brahmin, then the relationship changing once the truth came out.
That yawning gap, again, happened with someone named Deshpande in Ambernath.
And the deepest pain, as we said, was it bothering his own family.
Yeah.
Niece, wife, friends.
Which leads to that powerful statement he makes.
About the internal battles.
Yeah. It is easy to battle against the outsiders. The most arduous battle has to be fought against one's own.
Yet despite all that pressure, all that pain, he kept the name.
Decided not to let it go. And he writes, it has begun to sound even more a part of me. That embrace of identity right there.
The memoir ends as he's leaving Chandrapur after years there.
Yeah, it describes feeling like leaving home. Because of the community ties formed, especially with the Sapkale family, shows the bonds forged in that struggle.
What an incredible journey. Just raw, moving, chronicled in Joothan. From the Basti eating Joothan through education, discrimination, finding Ambedkar, becoming a writer, an activist.
The power of it, drawn from these specific experiences in the sources, is bringing those unseen realities right to the surface,
Right.
honestly.
So for you, our listener, think about how hearing these specific things, the sweeping, the rotis dropped from above, the surname causing such ripples, the pushback from within his family, how does that challenge or deepen your understanding of social inequality, of the human cost?
Yeah, and maybe take it one step further, considering those internal battles, the conflict even with loved ones. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if simply asserting your identity, like keeping your name or resisting a humiliating custom, causes such friction? What does that tell us about how deep these social barriers run? And while the sheer courage it takes to live authentically and demand dignity, that's definitely something to mull over.